Blues podcast. Donny Fandango, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic.
Ooh.
Gentlemen, we are at a particular time in the sports year that as a sports fanatic, it sucks. Like, it is just barren.
What are you talking about?
Like, first of all, when I am praying to watch the Cardinals tomorrow night, I think that kind of just...
Oh, yeah, that's bad.
That just kind of shows you where everything is. But, like, I was ready for hockey season to start about a week after the finals was over. So it's just that weirdo time of the year. There's not a lot going on.
I think this is the worst time to be a sports fan, like this time of year. Because at least like in the All-Star break for hockey, you've got football still. Mm-hmm. You've got college basketball. You've got the beginning or in the middle of the offseason of baseball. And like this one, you've got nothing because the offseason is officially like, I mean, you've been 3 weeks into the hockey offseason. You're done. You've got no other sports. I mean, college and NFL are in training camp, but it's still, far away. You've got baseball and that's it, which is fine because at least I've got something. But then when you hit that All-Star break, oh, dude, it sucks.
I've listened to Alex's midday show the past couple days. There is nothing going on.
Sucks.
There's nothing going on.
I didn't even think, I never thought about that until, in just getting to know the sports guys over the course of the last couple of years. But, like, I never really thought about when you have extended periods of time with nothing good going on in the world of the sports, how in the hell that you go about filling time on a daily friggin' basis.
So this is, like, what we do now is easier because we have multiple people. Like, I get to host with BK and Tanner, and so, like, there's 3 of us coming up with ideas. When I used to do it at KMOX, and I would have to do Sports Open Line from 6 to 8 o'clock, because this is the week typically the full-time guy would take off. Because, of course, the All-Star break, I've been doing the entire season. So I would fill in, and it would be Monday, Tuesday. You'd have the All-Star festivities, so at least there's something there. But then Wednesday, Thursday until the Cardinals would start up, those Wednesday, Thursdays were awful because you couldn't get guests. They were always on vacation or they were unavailable. You couldn't really come up with topics to get into because you're doing this as a solo host. It's like, what the hell is going on right now?
Not as easy as you think.
No, and a 23-year-old, too.
You guys have done it before, and you're used to it. I am not used to it, but I used to host a show here at 101 with John Kelly. We had a weekly hockey show, and it was just awesome to be in the booth with him. But there was a night that he couldn't make it, and so I had to go on for an hour by myself talking about the Blues, and that's not easy to do when you're just
by yourself?
Yeah, when you're just not a radio guy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you come in and you talk with John Kelly, that's easy to have a conversation. But when you're bringing it back and doing all the stuff you guys do, by yourself, it was difficult. But here's the kicker. I was not supposed to read ads per my contract with the Post-Dispatch. So as we come back from break, the guy, the operator, he says, hey, you got to read this Taco Bell ad. And in my head, I'm thinking, I know I'm not supposed to do this. So as I'm getting ready to start reading the ad, I'm thinking, please, boss, don't be listening. Please, boss, at the
That's when you throw your voice there and you just go hype it. Hi, this is talking about Taco Bell.
But if you want to know one thing that I'm smooth about talking about, it's Taco Bell. so that ad was the best part of the show.
Taco Bell was probably like, how the hell do we get a hold of this guy for more? Who is this king?
We need more from this Jeremy person.
Find out who he is.
$1.99 gorditas this week.
JR's, he's miming eating one in the middle of his live read.
I don't want to get too off the walls here, but I got to tell you something. I don't do a lot of fast food anymore because I'm just trying to be better and to not have 3 chins. But I'll tell you what, the Taco Bell down the street from my house on Tesson Ferry is one of the most reliable fast food establishments that I've ever been to. It is always good. It is always fast. They are always kind and polite.
And it's hot.
Dude, 100%.
Which, how often do you go get fast food where it's not warm?
I cannot tell you. Listen, I'm going to tell you something. The next time that I go to a fast food place and I order fries and I get those sons of bitches in the bag and they come out and they're floppy and greasy, I can't do it anymore. It's why I don't order fries anywhere anymore because they don't do them right.
So I've never been to that Taco Bell, but tell Mike and Mindy and Angie I said hi down there.
Tell Angie that I remember her pico de gallo and I miss it.
So, anywho, again, off the path. So, over the course of the last week or so, some pretty big things going on in the world of the St. Louis Blues. I don't know why I keep wanting to call him Gary Suter. I swear
Gary Suter.
I swear to God, every time in my head,
I always go Brent Suter in my head.
just because I'm sizably older than you. But the Blues made a signing, and then a few days later, this whole Torey Krug situation comes to pass. So I want to talk about the Torey Krug stuff first, and then I think we can kind of talk about, the defense and how it looks. Guys, I understand that this was sort of how a lot of Blues fans felt that Torey Krug was sort of the odd man out here, that they wanted to move the salary for something else to either, create some salary flexibility or what have you. But the reality is that Torey Krug is a really good goddamn defenseman. And Torey Krug not being in this top 6, to me, makes the team not as good as they were last year for sure. It seems to me that this is a sizable loss for the Blues. I want to know, what is the issue, this ankle thing that we've been talking about, or this arthritic condition, but then also, too, how do you see the Blues defense itself rebounding from losing a guy like Torey Krug, potentially for the year? Because I think we kind of already know where this is going, guys. I would be shocked if that guy's playing this year. Wouldn't you say?
I mean, I don't necessarily know.
Not a doctor.
Yeah, I don't know how to rehab pre-arthritis, but it sounds like that they have a surgery in place if they don't feel like he fixes itself. I mean, I read, so when I saw the news, what was that, a couple of nights ago, I mean, my first thought was the conspiracy theory of, oh, well, this is just a fake injury to get Torey Krug on the injured list so you can LTIR him, you couldn't trade him. And then it's like, okay, you start to look back through it, and I mean, Torey Krug has had a lot of ankle issues. 2018, when I think it was against Tampa Bay when he was with Boston, I believe it was a broken ankle or it was a fractured ankle or whatever. He missed the rest of the playoffs with his left ankle. And then if you just look through, I was looking at, I think it was on CBS Sports, of just like all of the injury history of Torey Krug. A couple of them were ankle injuries. You had a lot of lower body injuries, and you're thinking, okay, this guy's dealt with some ankle problems. Mm-hmm. And then when I woke up the next morning, I read Arpon's piece of Shea Weber.
Right.
And this was the part where it really kind of like light bulb. It's like, dang, this guy might be seriously injured. If you read Arpon's piece on The Athletic talking about Shea Weber's just career in the NHL, he is like still affected by his ankle injury. He broke his ankle in the playoffs and kept playing on it, and it was a ligament damage that he has never been the same. And it's why he had to step away in 2020 after Montreal got bounced in that Stanley Cup final. And then it's like, okay, so he fractures his foot, and then it's a lasting injury on him. And now you're talking about a guy who's got pre-arthritis in his ankle, who has had a lot of issues with his ankle. That's scary for anybody. I mean, just the personal side of it, that's got to suck if you're Torey Krug, because you're 33 years old. At the end of this contract, you're 36. And if you're already having issues with pre-arthritis with your ankle, you might not be able to play again. So that was my first thought, is like, damn, like this is a serious injury for Torey Krug and the Blues, because whether you like Torey Krug or don't like Torey Krug, it's $6.5 million of a guy that might not be able to play for you before his contract is up.
Yeah, and I think Alex's reaction was probably a lot of the same that I heard. Some skepticism. Is this injury for real? And I think the only guy on the team that would probably get that kind of reaction is Torey Krug, right, because there's been so much trade speculation. And Donny, over the years, I think there's been stories written about, in the NHL, guys who aren't necessarily injured, but the team,
the Vegas Golden Knights history.
Yeah, I think you got Robida Island, has been written about. And so there's situations where teams like, hey, look, you're not in our plans. We're not going to play you. We can't move you. We're going to do X, Y, Z. But I think in this situation, to me, that doesn't make sense, because if Torey Krug's healthy and wants to play, he's got 3 years left on his contract. Like, he's not going to go somewhere and not play because of this situation. So, now in hindsight, we can look at the Ryan Suter signing and perhaps even the P.O. Joseph signing as depth signings to cover for Torey Krug. And the one thing I'll say is this. One thing I've learned over the years in covering this team is they don't always know exactly what's happening in a situation or with a given player's health, when we think they do. So we sit there, oh, they knew about this last whatever. They might have found out about this 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. You don't know. And so they move with the news that they get. And so let's say they get it a few weeks ago, they make a couple signings, depth signing, you still don't get the evaluation on Krug. Maybe the final evaluation came in a few days ago. Okay, here's the deal. Just in talking to people over the years, after the fact about cases like this one, you learn how the team just had to react in real time. And so now the Blues are in a situation where they're going to find out about Torey Krug in 6 to 8 weeks, and if it's surgery, as they mentioned, it's going to be for the full season. But, in the meantime, I'm sure we'll get into Ryan Suter and P.O. Joseph and what this means for the Blues defense. They're going to have to rely on these guys.
Okay, so I don't mean to get so technical here or weird with details.
Oh, no,
but,
let's get weird. Are you kidding me?
All right, so after the season is over, does Torey Krug have some kind of physical? And is that where this situation starts to percolate?
Yeah, I think there's a exit, thing when they leave. I know you have the exit interviews. Do they actually go through a physical? That's a good question. I shouldn't say for sure because I don't know that. But we do know, as Alex said earlier, off air when we started the pod here, that we've asked Doug Armstrong a number of times. Hey, anybody have any injuries that are going to take them out for a while, or could they overlap into the season?
That's as recent as prospect camp, the last day of prospect camp. We asked him, which was 3 days into free agency.
Yeah. And he said, no, not that I'm aware of. Obviously, he's going to be aware of everything. So,
right.
When he says that, we always kind of grin.
Yeah.
But he said, other than maybe Sundqvist, but Sundqvist should be ready. That's it. So, does he know about Torey Krug? He perhaps does. Is he going to come out and say, hey, you guys, you know what? Now that you asked that question, Torey Krug is dealing with, X, Y, Z. So, I think they have to get that stuff figured out, going back to what I was saying a second ago, before they're able to come out and definitively say what they said this week.
And I have to imagine they stay in some contact with the trainers, but they have their own off-season team that they're with. And so I'm just assuming here this is what this is, but you got to imagine that if you're going through your off-season stuff, because Torey Krug missed the last couple of games, and I don't think it was due to his ankle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the season that he missed some time with his ankle problem.
Yeah, and I put a paragraph in my story saying that, what was it, around Christmas time?
Yeah, Christmas, that's what it was.
A couple years ago, that he missed about 13 games with, he blocked a shot, and I think it was the ankle. And so, for people, look, I called the doctor a couple days ago. Hey, tell me more about this pre-arthritic condition, and how could this be rehabbed?
The doctor say, Jesus, JR, you already got pre-arthritis?
Yeah, for myself here. And what's going to determine whether he needs surgery or not?
Yeah.
And so anyway, just to explain to people who are like, well, what is this about? I mean, this is, like the Blues said in the release, this is cumulative. This could be 2 or 3 ankle injuries that he's had, and then it creates a situation that he's dealing with now. So this isn't just like one bone break, everybody gets it. It's nothing like that.
No. Sorry, Donny. I if I remember correctly, JR, didn't Torey Krug last season before training camp, they weren't sure if he was going to be ready at training camp? Or am I misremembering that it was Torey Krug? Because I thought there was somebody at the beginning of training camp last year that they said he might not be 100%, and then as training camps kept going, you saw more and more of him, and it's like, okay, he should be able to go.
Yeah, I think it might have been Krug, because remember, Krug was coming back from the situation with when he nixed the trade.
Yeah.
And I don't think we got him early in camp because he might have not been there.
Because I remember thinking last year that Scott Perunovich was going to get some opportunities. So, like I said, it's just kind of throwing things out there right now. But that was my original thought, was it's like, this isn't any different than before, where it's like you get somebody that gets closer to training camp and it's like, I'm not 100%.
Okay, guys, so then, all right, where is the timing of this rumored potential trade to Anaheim when it comes to all of this injury talk? Because to me, that could be something that could have kept Anaheim from wanting to go forward with the deal, but it seems as though that wasn't the case, that it was Torey Krug that was saying, yep, not going anywhere. Yeah. What do we know about that?
Yeah, because that was David Pagnotta that put that out. I think it was on Twitter the day that we got the news of Torey Krug, that he was hearing, there were rumors around the league that Anaheim was talking about Torey Krug, and then he nixed the trade, and Anaheim might have gotten a look at the medical record. So, I mean, Pagnotta's plugged in, just like a lot of these insiders are around the league. That would make sense, and it would coincide with the injury of Torey Krug. If they were checking about it, he nixed the trade, or it was the injury stuff. Because if this is pre-arthritis, other teams are going to see this also and be like, we can't trade for this guy. He might not play this season. Right. So I got to imagine this wasn't even Torey Krug nixing it. This might have been Anaheim calling and getting medical records and saying, I don't know if this is it for us. And again, this is just one person saying that he heard Anaheim was interested in it. But I think it's pretty evident, and we heard multiple times from Doug Armstrong that they said, we're going to get a new look to our defense this offseason.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the trade speculation on this one with regard to Anaheim. All I know is that when I wrote a piece last week, I did my due diligence, and I reached out and I talked to people close to Krug who said that he would not waive his no-trade clause. Now, is that a moot point because he knows about the pre-arthritic condition and there's no trade on the table? I don't know. All I know is that at that point, he would not waive the no-trade.
Yeah.
All right. So, in a lack of a better way to say this, so how badly does this hose up our defense going into to 2024, 2025? I mean, and I know that, there are going to be some of those, again, like I said earlier, like those Krug detractors out there, but especially towards the end of the season when he was playing I don't know. I felt like he was playing like he wanted to be traded somewhere else, like somewhere that he wanted to be better.
Pissed off.
But he seemed like he was playing pretty angry, and I thought that he was having some really great games. There's got to be a drop-off here with Ryan Suter, with whomever. So, guys, I want you to talk about sort of the impact that you think that this makes on the defense going into the year.
It's interesting that you think it's going to be a drop-off because my first thought was, and this is going to sound awful, this has nothing to do with Torey Krug, it sucks that he's injured. My first thought was this might actually benefit the Blues. And not so much that you're losing Torey Krug, because Torey did play a lot more physical towards the end, which is something we were clamoring for. But I think the physicality that Torey Krug brings, Ryan Suter brings that. Whether you think Ryan Suter is going to be a good defenseman or not, dude's 40 years old. Last season he averaged 18 and a half minutes for Dallas, playing top four pair, and finished as a plus-minus type of player. So, he's not a bad defenseman, and from everything I've read, it sounds like this dude still is happy to throw a cross-check in front of the net. So, to me, Leddy and Parayko were the two guys that were going to be together. I'm just assuming Ryan Suter and Matt Kessel are going to be a pair for this upcoming season. And then you were talking about Torey Krug with Justin Falk. It really comes down to what's the growth of Scott Perunovich, which I think is a good thing for the Blues. Sucks that you lose Torey Krug, but you're replacing Torey Krug with the Scott Perunovich, who play a very similar brand of hockey. Scott Perunovich is going to have to start shooting the puck, but he's going to get power play chances now, I would imagine, with Torey Krug potentially not playing. And you've also got a guy who's going to play with Justin Falk, who has played with him in the past. And you've also got this Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who could slot in as a 6'3" left-handed defenseman. So, I didn't think it really hurt the Blues. It sucks to lose Torey Krug, but you're replacing Torey Krug with a guy who profiles almost similarly to him, and you're going to slot him right into the spot that I would imagine they were going to play Torey Krug this season.
That makes sense.
And I just think that there's a lot of Blues fans out there, you guys hear them too, where, they just want to move this thing along. They want to see which young guys can play and which guys you're going to be able to lean on in the next couple of years. And maybe some people have already determined that Scott Perunovich isn't one of those guys. I'm still a guy who's willing to give him a chance and give him some opportunity. And he was going to get some opportunity with Torey Krug in there, but now with Ryan Suter coming in, he's going to get a lot more now with Krug out. And so he knows, I'm going to talk to him here, I think, in the next couple of days, Scott Perunovich. He knows he needs to shoot the puck. He might get an opportunity now to run that number one power play, right? So he's going to get the look. We're going to be able to find out a lot about Scott Perunovich right now. And the way I see it, whether it be an injury with Torey Krug or, let's say, a trade went through Anaheim, wherever, I just wasn't counting on Torey Krug being here this year.
Or at least playing significant minutes this year.
Yeah, so to me, it's not like all of a sudden you're losing Nick Leddy, or now all of a sudden you're losing Colton Parayko, where you're like, whoa, that's the top pair, so on and so forth. So I think they have players who can step in, and not only players who can step in, but players who most fans want to see more of anyway.
Because my first thought was, let's just say before we knew about Torey Krug's stuff and they weren't able to pull off a trade, you had 9 defensemen, and 6 of them were left-handed. There were going to be, because I don't think this team is going to carry 9 defensemen. I don't think they're going to carry 8 defensemen, because that lessens the amount of forwards you can carry, and if you want some of these younger guys to get a shot. But if you're going to have 9 defensemen, you are going to have to put 1, maybe 2 through waivers. And, you're not going to put a Joseph through waivers because you just signed him. Suter's not going through waivers, nor is Leddy. And now you get to Tucker, Perunovich, and Krug. So, Tucker you could probably sneak through waivers, But you put Perunovic, you're probably going to see that guy get claimed, and why would you give him the contract if you're going to do that? And then you get to Torey Krug. So I was like JR, I just kind of looked at it and says, I don't know where Torey Krug's going to get playing time if he's healthy for this team.
Well, right. But if the guy's making $6.5 million a year and is healthy enough to be out there, they're gonna find a way to get him ice time.
You would imagine.
I mean,
yes, but I mean, man, then you're gonna have Scott Perunovic sitting up in the press box on a night because Suter's not coming out of the lineup. I mean, he was brought in for incentives to games played, and from at least when we talked to him, and I know you spoke to him as well, Jared, it sure sounds like his role is going to be a guy who's going to be relied upon every night. And you're not sitting Nick Leddy because he's playing with Colton Parayko.
Right.
So you've got three guys to choose from, Scott Perunovic, Torey Krug, and Pierre-Olivier Joseph. I would imagine Joseph's probably the odd man out there. But, I mean, you got 33-year-old Torey Krug, who you've tried to trade 2 times, or Scott Perunovic, who you just gave another contract to. That sure seems like you got another chance to prove who you want to be.
Okay, so I just was thinking of this. So, all right, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, for sake of conversation, you've got Torey Krug that sits out this year to recover from surgery, if that is how this goes. How does this relationship with the Blues and Torey Krug continue on with him being, attempted to be traded essentially 2 years in a row? This injury thing now, I mean, the writing is sort of on the wall here that, Torey, you don't quite fit into what's going on here anymore. How do you guys see this situation progressing? I mean, I guess a lot of it depends on the injury because if he can't play, then that's everything. But what do you think?
Well, I think under your hypothetical, so that he needs surgery and he's going to miss the year. Okay, so then you're going to find out a lot, 1 year's time, about the Perunovic and about, I can't see Ryan Suter coming back after this year, but, you're going to find a lot about some guys. And I think what would happen is you'd be moving on without Torey Krug, right? But then he comes back, let's just, again, hypothetically, he comes back next season, not this upcoming, but the one after that. Let's say he's healthy. Let's just assume that he can skate, he can play. 2 years left on his deal. Does he still fit into your plans? I don't think so. As you said, you've kind of been pushing him out for the past couple of years. So I think at that point, it's just going to be a couple things. One, is there a team out there that would take what we assume is a healthy Torey Krug? He passes medical tests, all that stuff, and now he's only got 2 years left. The cap's gone up to whatever, $90+ million, and he's only 6.5. There might be a team that takes him at that point, but you are talking about a 34-year-old Torey Krug who's coming off an ankle surgery.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of questions that we just can't answer at this point. But in terms of the Blues, I just can't see him going back in time and saying, hey, let's put him in the second pair. He's our guy. I think they'd move on at that point.
The only way you get to that point is if Scott Perunovic doesn't pan out like you think with all the playing time, and next year he's available to you. But, I mean, he's got the Wally Pipp syndrome in front of him now, because it's not just Scott Perunovic. You've also got Theo Lindstein, who's going to more than likely be a pro next season, not this upcoming season. You've got a couple of other guys who are going to be in the AHL next year. That's going to be a tough road for Torey Krug, which, I'm sure he's probably gone through that his entire life, being an undrafted player, that you got to go up against these younger players and things like that. But with the ankle injury, I mean, that's a significant, it really comes down to if he's healthy enough to play again, because there have been plenty. I mean, Shea Weber, the one I referenced with Arpon's article from Montreal, now I understand he was 36 or 38 years old, I think, when this happened. But he just essentially called it a career, and he still had 4 or 5 more years at $7.5 million, and he was traded twice with that long contract. Brent Seabrook was another one that when he called it a career, he was traded. So it's really going to come down to what Torey Krug deems he can still do, because if he feels like he can play, I don't know how easy that's going to be to trade. You might just have to be a part of this team, or maybe you get to waivers, buyouts. But if you're injured, that contract gets moved around a little easier.
Guys, I have to take a hard pause here real quick to tell you a story about the Radiothon real quick that you're both going to love, and I cannot believe that I forgot to tell you on the last podcast.
I love these.
Guys, so the day of the podcast, or the day of the Radiothon, my friends in Story of the Year were in Chicago playing a show with the youth.
My friends in Story of the Year.
Name drop.
Yeah, but they're
like
St. Louis.
Darren Pang saying I'm best friends with Steve Eiserman.
But I think that's different, though, because they're St. Louis band. But anyway, all right. So they had a show, then they had a day off the next day. The day off coincided with the Radiothon. So they called from Comiskey Park, where they were absolutely loaded, and donated $200, okay, which was really nice. But then a follow-up call happened. They were brought to the game by that guy, the backup goaltender for the Hawks, Darling, that whizzed all over St. Louis. What the heck is his name?
Scott Darling.
Scott Darling.
Yeah.
So Scott donated $201 to the radiothon. And so I just said on the radio that he just needed to be nice to St. Louis and that we would take care of him if he were a player here, not to be completely forgotten about as if he would be a player in Chicago. But I just wanted to say that dude donated $201 to the radiothon this past
Donny
year.
had to have been so torn at that moment.
Yeah, I was.
Scott Darling donating money, just no.
Yeah, I can't say anything bad about him.
Yeah,
Okay.
my favorite part is that, like, I totally forgot about what Scott Darling said about St.
did
Louis.
too.
And Donnie's, no, hey, this guy. Like,
This guy crapped all over St. Louis.
Listen, I live here. I can crap on it. You don't. You cannot. Okay, so back to what we were saying before and back to the Blues defense. You know, one of the things that we said a lot last year during the podcast and talking specifically about the D is that we wish that they were a little gnarlier, that they had a little bit more P and V in them. When you talk about a second pair of Suter and Kessel, oh, baby.
Yeah.
That ain't going to make a lot of friends. I like that a lot. Like, I feel like that is sort of like the thing that kind of maybe tilts them a little bit, gets them a little bit more angry.
I mean, I hope that they go that way because I'm going to look like a genius. But if Suter and Kessel, like if Bannister day one's like, yeah, these two are never going to play together. I'd be like, son of a, why do I call myself a hockey guy?
welcome to my
Yeah,
world.
but I mean, we talked with Matt DeFranks when the signing happened, and Matt, of course, with the Post-Dispatch, covered Suter for those 3 years in Dallas before he came to St. Louis. And Matt even said, like, he's slow, but he plays physical still, and you kind of have that veteranism to where you can throw a cross-check in front of the net and not take a penalty, where Scott Perunovich would take a penalty for it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he said he still plays with some nastiness, and I mean, we saw it in Dallas, and you talk about a guy who got to the Cup final one year and another Stanley Cup final potential the other year. I just think he and Kessel provide a little bit more size and nastiness as a, I'm going to go air quote, shutdown pair. You've got Leddy and Parayko that played so well together, and then you just hope Justin Falk has a rebound year. But that's why I looked at it and I said, man, I don't know if the team got worse because Ryan Suter's still a decent defenseman, and I'll take decent with the ability to play a little nasty in front of your net over what you had last year where nobody wanted to do that.
But do you guys think, and we, you can debate, second pair, third pair, even with the forwards, who's the third line, do you guys think Matt Kessel will get more ice time than Justin Falk?
That's the part I don't.
Yeah.
That's the part I don't, because I still think Falk's going to get 22-plus minutes a night. But got to think Kessel's not going to be used as just a third-pair defenseman.
Yeah, and there's obviously multiple things happening with Justin Falk last year, right? We were not getting the best of that guy, especially the last bit of the season, right?
I still think he was messed up after he blocked that shot versus Colorado, and he came back, but he wasn't the same guy.
And
when
then he kind of got tripped in the corner, against, it was Colorado. Was that same game you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so high ankle sprain, and then he was okay, and then it hurt him again. And yeah, he was getting, I just kept saying uncharacteristic issues.
He felt a lot like what Parayko did, where he was bad the one year, he had the back problems, and people were like, get rid of this guy. And then last year, we got the Colton Parayko. It's like, sometimes you look at it and you say, I do the same thing with Braden Shen right now. People say Braden Shen looked awful. That's fine, but there were a lot going on behind closed doors with Braden Shen, with being the captain and Berube getting fired than just his play on the ice. There are a couple guys I'll give a flyer to, and Falk's that guy. But if Falk does struggle again, I mean, you got to play Kessel.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'm looking forward to watching Matt Kessel again. Like, it's going to be exciting. But so I don't disagree with your pairs. I just think that maybe, and I hadn't talked to Drew Bannister about this yet, but maybe Leddy Parayko, Suter, Falk, and Suter said they've played together. I think he was talking.
Was it the Team
with
USA or the
US.
IHF?
Yeah,
one?
so obviously not in the NHL, but US. So they know each other and play together a little bit. So maybe second pair, and then maybe go Perunovich, Kessel. But obviously that's going to change 72 times.
Well, Perunovich and Kessel, I mean, again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but Perunovich and Kessel, that's just a dangerous pair you're going with because you got two guys that have experience, but rookie players compared to separating them and playing them with two veteran guys.
Right.
But the problem with it is Perunovich and Falk are the exact same player. And at least Perunovich and Kessel are different players. So either way, you're looking at pairings that, I mean, think of the way you ended it last year to where you had, it was Leddy and Parayko. I think a lot of it was Krug and Falk because I got angry an awful lot that they didn't play Krug and Kessel together. And then you had Matt Kessel playing with, and I don't even know if it was Scott Perunovich. I think by the end of the season it was Tyler Tucker. I mean, now you're talking about Tyler Tucker probably being your eighth defenseman with Joseph in front of him. It's not like you go from a missing the playoffs to a playoff contender team, but I do think you are a slight tick in the opposite direction than what you were last year.
And finally, listen, this was a make or break year for Scott Perunovich anyway. But now, the young man is going to really get the opportunity to showcase it. Homeboy has just got to stay healthy. Bubble wrap it until now, until training camp, whatever you got to do. A question, guys, about...
JR, think of that when you talk to Scott later
that's
on.
what I was going to say.
Hey, bubble wrap it, all right, Scott?
Yeah. I wish I had recorded that. Hey, Scott, listen to this. Homeboy's got to stay healthy.
No, I don't mean to be a douche.
Yeah,
Because I know that the guy has heard it a zillion times, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah,
all right.
sure.
Okay, so guys, if Tory Krug is not able to come back this year, and the Blues are able to LTIR, put him on the long-term injured reserve, and they've now all of a sudden are flush with $6.5 million of Torey Krug money, do they do anything with that?
No. So here's the deal, and it's a fair observation, and we talked about this a little bit the other day in the article, is that the only way you can spend that money is if you go over the cap. So if the cap is $88 million, according to Puckpedia, the Blues are 7.3 under that right now. So unless they were to spend that 7.3 million and get themselves to the cap, and now all of a sudden they want to replace Torey Krug, then what happens is they leave the salary cap system and they formally go into LTIR, and then the league gives them Torey Krug's salary, 6.5. So that allows them to go 6.5 million over the $88 million salary cap. But if you're not even at the cap, you can't even utilize
So
that
you can't
LTIR
touch that
situation.
LTIR money until you spend your own cap
Yeah, there's
space.
no reason to be in LTIR unless you're using the cap space, because basically what the league is allowing you to do, hey, you were a cap team, you planned to be a cap team, you had a good lineup, you lost this guy for the whole season, so now we're going to let you go over the cap X amount. But if you're a team that spends 8, 10, 15 million under the salary cap and you lose a guy, you've got the money to go out and replace him.
And well, in my first, because I saw the same thing that Donny was asking by a lot of Blues fans saying, oh, now they're going to use that cap space. It's like they already had 7.5 cap space still, and I didn't see them making any other moves.
Yeah, they don't even plan to use that, really.
Yeah, exactly. And let's just go down, let's just fast forward to the trade deadline, and let's say that the Blues decide to be a market for a lot of teams that need to shed cap space and get rid of bad contracts so they can open up other like you got $7.5 million. You can take 2 guys and bad contracts on and take in the draft picks and not even worry about the Torey Krug LTIR. So I never thought that was a factor into it, because you're not really gonna make any other moves. Your roster is set right now. The only difference is going to be when you get to the trade deadline, if you're out of it and you decide to take on a couple of other teams' caps. But even then, you still got all of the cap space to make that work, to not even worry about LTIR. And then you're going into another offseason with free agents and figuring out where you're at. Next year would be the part where I feel like LTIR might be a little bit more interesting, because you got Buch's raised and you've got Jake Neighbors, who I would think is going to need a contract extension by that time, and a lot of other guys coming in.
Wow! Oh, wow! So that's one of the incredible sort of parts about this, is that there's so many different scenarios on how this can kind of sort of work out or work or not work for the Blues going forward. It's just really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. And I do feel as though, with what the other teams in the Central have done, I am very concerned about the Blues making the playoffs this year. But hearing you today, Mr. Ferrario, you make me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, that's the problem, though. I'm the ultimate optimist with this team, and it just gets shoved in my face.
I am the ultimate. I am blind optimism with this team, man. I was glass half full up until like 20 games left in the year last year.
The narrative for me on BK and Ferrario is I hate the Cardinals and I love the Blues. And whatever that narrative is, fine, but it always gets blown in my face at some point with the Blues. But at least for right now, I think there's a shot for 2 wild card spots, but you got like 6 teams fighting for 2 wild card spots in the Western Conference, and that's going to be who the Blues are. To me, it's all going to come down to goaltending.
And Donnie, speaking of optimism, Alex mentioned the name Jake Neighbors a couple seconds ago. I had a chance to talk to Jake last night. Article coming up in The Athletic probably in the next couple days, but just wanted to touch base with him and reflect on that season, because at the end of the year you miss the playoffs, and obviously Jake's a team guy. He's not going to sit there and talk about a great season that he had, but he looked back, he said, yeah, I surprised myself. And to me, I like hearing that when people admit that they surprise themselves, because too many guys you go up to, hey, you scored 30 goals. Yeah, I knew I had this in me. I didn't get the opportunity, whatever. But Jake says, I surprised myself. And so I talked to him. He's gone back home for the off season.
He said he started skating earlier than he usually does. He's doing some off-ice training, which a lot of them do, but he started it earlier, and he really wants to build up some strength. If he's going to be a guy that's in the net front, he's got to build up that strength. Also said that he's working on his shot. You can't score every goal in front of the net, so somehow.
Oh, yeah? Ask Zach Hyman if you could score every goal in front of the net. The dude scored like 75 this year just standing in front of it.
Yeah, but the other cool takeaway from my chat with him is this. I was recently down at Enterprise Center at their gift shop. What is it? True Blue Authentic or whatever. They were out of Jake Neighbors jerseys.
Wow. Damn right they were.
Out
That's
of Jake
awesome.
Neighbors. So there was a worker there who was asked to make a Jake Neighbors jersey. Literally was going around the office space there where they have all the stitching and the numbers and the letters. Oh, here's an N. Here's a E. Here's an E. We got an I. Okay, we're gonna make this thing. We're gonna make
like
this.
me when I used to make poster projects for grade school and cut it out of magazines. Mom, can you find me a G?
I need a big E. I need a big E.
Make it purple.
So a half hour later, this guy hits the press and he puts the stamp on this Neighbors jersey, and it is the only one that they have to sell. And so I told Jake that story, and he's laughing. He said, "Gosh, St. Louis fans are great." So
That's awesome.
Guys, all right. Now listen. Think about some of the guys on this particular team. All right, your Jordan Benningtons, your Jake Neighbors, Braden Shin, Robert Thomas to a certain degree, but you're bringing in guys like Jimmy Snuggerud. You've got guys that just want nothing more than to win and to bleed for it. I love the type of player that is becoming a Blues player these days. And Jake Neighbors, whoa, baby, I love this guy.
That dude's going to be a fan favorite for a long time. And I remember when we talked with Bolduc at the end of the season. This was like when they were doing their exit stuff at Centene before he went off into the offseason. And he told me and BK, he was like, my biggest goal is to gain a lot of weight and muscle this offseason because I want to make sure that I don't get pushed off of pucks easy. And when he said that, of course, he's got that French-Canadian accent where I'm like, man, I feel like I'm talking to David Perron right now. But he said, I want to push other guys off of the puck next year. And I'm like, that's what we want to hear, Zach.
Again, man, I know.
I'm so glad we got the YouTube now. People can
this
see
is so good.
But again, and when you hear about the things that these guys say, and you hear about Dvorsky working, and knowing that it's up to him whether or not he makes the team, then you talk about it's just so many reasons I feel like for optimism, and I'm just ready. God, the season cannot start soon enough, man. And wait. When does even training camp begin? It's going to be like forever until that.
August 21st, I want to say.
August. You starting it early?
Oh, yeah.
September,
that's what I meant, yeah.
I think
September,
probably
like 14th, something like that, because I think their first game's the 21st.
Yeah, and then they play like 10 hours later after they get to
get to training camp, be like, all right, you're heading to Minnesota.
Oh, you know what? That is something that needs to change. The season needs to start a week earlier, at least, if not two.
Well, they need to cut 4 games out of preseason.
Boom. You've been saying that for forever, and that's absolutely the case. And then that way, we're not doing the Stanley Cup Finals in August, for the love of Jesus.
10 games off the regular season.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, cut a couple games off the regular season while you're at it, but I never understood why there needs to be 7 preseason games. Like, by game 2 of the preseason, you've already gotten every rookie in. You know most guys are going back to their junior teams. There's probably like 2 guys that are competing for it. And ask any of the veterans. I'll never forget. I think it was the year after they won the Stanley Cup, and I was talking to Shen and just asked him about preseason. He goes, I hate these. He's like, 2 in, I'm good to go.
Yeah,
he's like, my body knows I'm ready to play. It's like, let's just freaking play.
They work hard sooner. They're ready.
Yeah, there's no point. Especially, like JR said, they're training by like June.
Right. It's not like it was back in the day where the players would use training camp to get into shape.
All the alcohol.
They're already right. They're already freaking coming in, dialed in almost.
Hey, and you brought up exhibition. It just reminds me of such a funny story. So I used to fly the team plane, and especially in exhibition, because for preseason games, Donnie, they fly in, play the game, fly out right after. Like, they're in Dallas for a game for 6 hours, right? And a couple years ago, I went with them, so I'm in the press box. They're getting ready to drop the puck on the preseason game, and John Hadley, you guys know John here in St. Louis, he reports, and this was way early on the Blues beat for me. Like, I was still finding my footing, and John Hadley reports that a man named Dave Checketts might buy the St. Louis Blues. So I'm in contact with my editor back here in St. Louis. He's like, where are you at? And where am I at? I'm in the press box in Dallas. The preseason game's getting ready to start. Okay, well, you got to stay there in that press box and report the story. And I said, the team is getting on the plane and flying back to St. Louis after. I can't do that. They go, you're going to have to spend the night. So I had to talk to the Dallas PR guy.
He makes a bunch of phone calls trying to find a hotel room and then waits for me to finish the story about Checketts potentially buying the team, gives me a ride to the hotel. Donnie, this hotel, it was like the only one available. It was called, I'll never forget, Turtle Creek. It was about a $400 room.
I thought it was called STD Inn.
That's where I thought it was going.
I was in the room maybe 4 hours because I got to there 2 in the morning, after I finished my story and everything, and then get a ride to the airport and fly home wearing the same clothes that I left St. Louis. I think I'm going to go back with the Blues at 10 o'clock after. No, I'm noon the next day.
Donnie, do you have the same image I do of this nasty hotel room? JR lays out one of those cloth towels on the bed, and he just sits in a little corner, and he's like this. I don't want to touch anything in this room.
And just watching the time. Just watching the time.
Oh, I got to make my flight. 2 a.m., 2 a.m.
Down there for a preseason game. So I don't go any more road.
That's why JR doesn't like preseasons anymore.
Yeah.
And this year, where are they taking you to? Wichita, Kansas?
Milwaukee. They're going to for one of them.
Milwaukee.
And then, I think the other one, I don't know. The one in Chicago's against Chicago's played in Milwaukee. I think there's another one that they're playing in some remote site or something like
I'll look
that.
at
I
the
think
schedule
it's
in a couple
Wichita.
weeks.
I was going to say, I'll look at it when I get closer to
Like
it.
Wichita or Oklahoma City or just
Look,
something.
as much as I love the start of hockey season, I also need to delay it as much as possible because I'm going to have 3 kids at home, and I need to, try and get off-season mode as long as possible, so... Well, and of course, the way that this one works out, I'm going to have a newborn probably in August. The season starts in October. And of course, because Gary Bettman loves us with the scheduling, the second and third game of the season is a 9 o'clock start and a 9:30 start.
Oh,
So.
boy.
Yeah.
For Alex Ferrario.
That should get you pumped.
Yeah.
JR already offered up to come be the nanny for us those first few nights. So
He knows another JR.
Gentlemen, as always, we thank you very much for your unbelievable time and Blues knowledge. We'll do this again before training camp.
he was
What do
talking to
say?
you, JR.
Let's
There's
do it. Yeah,
unbelievable
yeah.
knowledge over
Yeah,
there.
so let's tell them we'll take a break here for a little bit.
I think so.
yeah.
Unless something big pops.
Yeah, when the Blues trade for Leon Draisaitl in September, we'll get back on the air and talk. But for now, I say let's just enjoy the offseason.
Absolutely so. For Alex Ferrario, Jeremy Rutherford, our homeboy Jeff Burton, Donnie Fandango, thank you, Blues fans, as always, for listening. And as always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.